In ancient Egypt, the life of the rich was defined not only by wealth, but by their position in a strictly hierarchical society. At the pinnacle stood the pharaoh, regarded not just as a king, but as a living god. Beneath him, a privileged class of nobles, high priests, government officials, military leaders, and landowners formed the elite, whose lives were steeped in power, culture, and influence. The upper class was a relatively small fraction of the population, but its members enjoyed extraordinary advantages, rooted both in inheritance and in service to the state. Wealth in ancient Egypt was closely tied to land ownership and proximity. To the pharaoh, the king granted estates and titles to those who had demonstrated loyalty or exceptional administrative or military service. This land came with not just crops and wealth, but control over the laborers who worked it. While the majority of Egyptians toiled in the fields or served as craftsmen, the elite class rarely worked with their hands. Instead, they directed others, managed resources, and ensured the machinery of the state continued to function. Their wealth was often expressed through architecture, dress, and burial practices, but it was built on a foundation of bureaucratic control and social privilege. Nobles were often born into their positions. Sons of high officials were educated in elite schools, taught to read and write, and trained in diplomacy and leadership. Literacy was rare in ancient Egypt, but among the elite, it was a symbol of distinction and a gateway to influence. Those who mastered hieroglyphics and administration could rise to powerful posts as scribes, viziers, or advisors to the pharaoh. Some were even appointed as governors of distant provinces, overseeing regional economies and acting as intermediaries between the local people and the central government in Thebes or Memphis. The priesthood also formed a key pillar of the upper class. High priests controlled vast temple estates and resources. They conducted sacred rituals, maintained the favor of the gods, and acted as advisors in matters both spiritual and political. Their influence was immense, and in some periods of Egyptian history, temple wealth rivaled even that of the state. These priests did not merely serve religious functions, they also supervised schools, libraries, granaries, and construction projects. Many temples functioned as economic centers in their own right, and the high priests were their de facto rulers, while many in the elite were born into privilege. The system was not entirely closed. A man of talent and ambition could rise through the ranks, especially if he served the pharaoh well. Military commanders who led successful campaigns or scribes who demonstrated exceptional skill could be rewarded with titles, land, and marriages into noble families. Though rare, these pathways ensured that the elite class was occasionally refreshed with new members, bringing in fresh perspectives while reinforcing the value of loyalty to the state. The family name and bloodline carried immense importance among the upper classes. Marriages were arranged not merely for love, but to strengthen political alliances and protect family interests. Wealth and status were passed down from generation to generation, and great emphasis was placed on legacy and lineage. Tomb inscriptions proudly listed ancestors, titles, and achievements, connecting the present to a noble and often divine past. Despite the apparent luxury and privilege, the lives of the rich were not entirely without responsibility. Nobles and officials were expected to act as caretakers of their land and people. They collected taxes, enforced laws, and organized labor for state projects, including the building of temples, canals, and royal tombs. Their power came with obligations, both administrative and religious, that were believed to uphold Marat, the divine order and balance of the universe. Failure to fulfill these duties could lead to disgrace or punishment, both in this life and the next. In this way, the elite of ancient Egypt lived within a complex social system where wealth and power were intimately connected to service, religion, and royal favor. They were the custodians of culture, the interpreters of divine will, and the architects of a civilization that would endure for millennia. Their lives, while separate from those of common people, were inseparably tied to the structure and stability of the Egyptian state, and their legacy remains carved in stone and painted on the walls of tombs that still whisper their names across the sands of time. The homes of the wealthy in ancient Egypt were more than mere shelters. They were carefully planned symbols of status, refinement, and social distance from the world of ordinary people. Unlike the cramped, mud-brick dwellings of the common folk, the residences of the elite were spacious estates, surrounded by walls that enclosed not just the main house, but often lush gardens, granaries, servant quarters, and private chapels. These houses were built with attention to both comfort and aesthetics, offering a life of order, tranquility, and abundance that mirrored the elite's role in preserving balance in the world. Around them, a typical noble estate was located on the outskirts of a city or near the banks of the Nile, where the river's gentle currents brought breezes that cooled the air. The structures themselves were usually made of sun-dried mud bricks, but the interiors were far from simple. The walls were often plastered and painted in soft tones, adorned with decorative patterns, scenes from daily life, or symbols of protection and prosperity. Floors were covered with woven reed mats, or, in wealthier households, decorated with tiles. High ceilings and small windows helped regulate temperature, while the use of open courtyards and airy lodges made the most of light and shade throughout the day. Within these homes, space was organized to separate private and public life. The front rooms were used to receive guests or conduct official matters, often containing ornate furniture such as carved wooden chairs, low tables, and ceremonial beds. These rooms also served as stages for social display, where the wealth and refinement of the household could be quietly announced through fine linens, incense, polished copper mirrors, and intricate faience ornaments. Further inside the house, more intimate spaces served as family living quarters and sleeping areas. These were typically less decorated, prioritizing privacy and comfort over display. Elite residences almost always featured a private garden, prized possession in the arid Egyptian landscape. These gardens were laid out in geometric patterns, with carefully planted trees such as date palms, sycamores, and pomegranate. Flowers bloomed in tidy beds, while vines grew over trellises, providing shade. Some estates included pools stocked with fish and lotuses, both for beauty and to cool the surrounding air. These green spaces were not only for leisure, but also held religious significance, symbolizing creation and rebirth. The garden was often a space for reading, music, conversation, and quiet contemplation in earthly paradise, where the elite could retreat from the obligations of public life. Water management was a critical element of elite comfort. Servants would draw water from wells or canals and store it in large ceramic jars inside the home. The wealthiest households even had rudimentary bathrooms and foot washing stations, and perfumed oils were used daily. Cleanliness and personal hygiene were highly valued, not only for health and comfort, but also as a reflection of social refinement. Perfume burners, scented ointments, and mineral powders were part of daily rituals that took place in designated areas of the home, often with the help of attendants. Servants played a silent but essential role in maintaining the household, from cooking and cleaning to running errands and caring for children. Their presence allowed the elite to focus on affairs of governance, religion, or leisure. These servants lived either in adjoining quarters or in small houses within the estate walls, and their daily activities kept the household functioning smoothly and efficiently. In the wealthiest homes, there were rooms designated for storage of luxury goods, textiles, oils, wine, and imported goods from distant lands. These storerooms were often locked and carefully inventoried, as their contents represented both wealth and access to rare commodities. The presence of such rooms highlighted the household's integration into Egypt's broader trade networks, including ties with Nubia, the Levant, and the Mediterranean world. Despite the functional sophistication of these estates, they were also highly symbolic spaces. Every architectural decision, from the number of columns in a hall to the inscriptions on the door lintels, reflected the owner's status, values, and connection to tradition. Many houses were aligned to cardinal directions or constructed with elements of temple design, subtly reinforcing the idea that the elite were custodians of divine order, even within their private lives. Through their homes, the rich in ancient Egypt created physical environments that mirrored the ideals they upheld in society: order, harmony, and control. These estates were not simply places to live, but carefully curated environments where beauty, power, and privacy could coexist. In their walls, gardens, and furnishings, one finds not only comfort, but a vision of a world as it should be regulated, flourishing, and serene. In ancient Egypt, the outward appearance of the elite was not only a matter of personal pride, but a deliberate expression of status, identity, and alignment with divine ideals. Clothing, grooming, and adornment served as visual declarations of power, refinement, and separation from the lower classes. The wealthy dressed not for necessity, but to communicate their position in the social order, their education in taste, and their understanding of the cultural values that governed elite life. From the finely woven linen garments they wore to the elaborate rituals of self-presentation they followed daily, the elite displayed themselves as beings of elegance, dignity, and control. Their clothing was crafted from linen spun so finely that it appeared almost translucent in the sun. Unlike the coarse and simple garments of laborers, the attire of nobles and high officials was tailored, pleated, and layered with care. The quality of the weave, the brightness of the fabric, and the sophistication of the design were all silent indicators of status. Long, flowing robes, tunics with intricate folds, and wide sashes were common among men, while elite women wore fitted sheath dresses often enhanced with decorative straps or sheer overskirts. The garments were immaculately clean and often perfumed, for cleanliness and fragrance were signs of moral as well as social superiority. Jewelry was not merely an accessory. It was a language of prestige. The wealthy adorned themselves with necklaces, earrings, bracelets, and rings crafted from gold, silver, electrum, and semi-precious stones, such as carnelian, lapis lazuli, turquoise, and amethyst. Each piece carried meaning symbols of protection, fertility, or divine favor, yet also served as a visible testament to the resources and craftsmanship available only to the privileged. Artisans, in service to the elite, created intricate amulets, broad collars, and elaborate diadems that transformed the body into a canvas of beauty and power. Jewelry was worn in both daily life and formal occasions, and it featured prominently in funerary contexts, where it was believed to assist the soul in its journey through the afterlife. Hairstyling was another realm in which the elite expressed their refinement. Men and women alike paid close attention to the grooming and presentation of their hair. While some chose to shave their heads for hygiene and comfort, others wore carefully styled natural hair or elaborate wigs made from human hair, wool, or plant fibers. Wigs were curled, braided, or adorned with beads and ribbons, depending on the occasion and the individual's rank. These wigs were valuable possessions, stored carefully and scented with oils to preserve their luster. Barbers and hairdressers often served noble households exclusively, and styling could take hours, especially in preparation for ceremonies or banquets. Cosmetics held a central place in elite self-presentation. Far from being a vanity, the use of makeup was part of a daily ritual that reflected aesthetic, medicinal, and spiritual concerns. Green malachite and black coal were applied around the eyes not only to enhance beauty, but to protect against the sun's glare and ward off disease. Red ochre was used to color the lips and cheeks, while scented oils were applied to the skin to soften and perfume the body. Both men and women participated in these rituals, and their makeup kits, often elaborately carved and inlaid with precious materials, were prized personal items. The process of beautification was as important as the result, reinforcing a sense of composure, elegance, and readiness to fulfill social roles. Scent played a powerful, almost mystical role in elite identity. Perfumes made from myrrh, frankincense, lotus, and cinnamon were stored in alabaster vessels and used to anoint the body or scent clothing. These aromatic substances were imported at great cost and used sparingly to mark religious ceremonies, romantic encounters, or formal appearances. The elite often wore wax cones infused with perfume on their heads during feasts, which slowly melted to release fragrance over time. Smell was believed to please both humans and gods, and thus fragrance was not only sensual but sacred. Footwear, while less emphasized than other elements of dress, still reflected status. The rich often went barefoot indoors but wore sandals, made from leather or woven papyrus when venturing outside. Some had specially made footwear for religious ceremonies or travel. These were sometimes decorated with dyed patterns or inscribed with protective symbols. Servants would carry the sandals of their masters, placing them carefully when needed, a small but telling sign of hierarchy in motion. The attention the elite gave to their appearance was not mere indulgence. It was rooted in the belief that the external body was a reflection of the internal order and virtue, just as the natural world was expected to be cultivated and the household maintained in harmony. The body itself was to be adorned and disciplined. In doing so, the elite distinguished themselves from the dusty world of labor and struggle, presenting themselves as embodiments of grace and cosmic alignment. Their clothing and adornment were acts of identity, ritual, and aspiration woven, threads in the grand tapestry of a civilization that revered both beauty and balance. The dining habits of the ancient Egyptian elite formed a world of contrast to the modest meals of the common people. Food was not merely sustenance for the rich, it was ceremony, pleasure, and display. Within the walls of their grand estates, meals were prepared with care and served with precision, turning the act of eating into a statement of refinement and abundance. Ingredients, presentation, and company were all chosen deliberately, reflecting both wealth and cultural ideals of enjoyment and generosity. Though ancient Egypt's geography and climate placed natural limits on its agriculture, the upper class found ways to turn these limits into opportunities for extravagance. The kitchens of the elite were busy centers of activity, staffed by trained cooks, bakers, brewers, and servants. These individuals were responsible for producing meals that would satisfy not only physical hunger but social expectations. While most people in Egypt lived on a simple diet of bread, onions, and beer, the elite enjoyed a diverse array of dishes, featuring ingredients that required time, skill, and resources to obtain. Meat was a central element of the upper-class diet. Beef, lamb, goat, and poultry were all consumed regularly. Ducks, geese, and even pigeons were fattened and served roasted or stewed with herbs. Fish from the Nile and from distant regions also appeared at the table, sometimes salted or preserved in oil to enhance flavor and longevity. Vegetables and legumes played a complementary role, but even these were selected with care. Leeks, cucumbers, garlic, lentils, chickpeas, and lettuce were cultivated in estate gardens or acquired through trade. Fruits such as figs, dates, grapes, and pomegranates were considered delicacies and often reserved for more lavish meals. These were eaten fresh or dried and used to flavor dishes or make sweet confections. Honey, rather than sugar, served as the primary sweetener and was highly prized. Gathered from carefully maintained hives and used in both food and drink, bread remained a staple even among the wealthy, but it was made from the finest flour, often sifted repeatedly to remove impurities. Bakers prepared it in a variety of forms: flat loaves, shaped rolls, or filled pastries. Some loaves were flavored with seeds, fruit, or spices to add richness and novelty. Beer too was consumed daily, but the beer of the elite was lighter, smoother, and often flavored with dates or herbs. In addition to beer, wine played a significant role in the dining culture of the upper classes. It was stored in ceramic jars sealed with wax, often labeled with the vineyard, vintage, and owner. Wine from the Nile Delta and imported vintages from the Levant or Crete graced the tables of the most powerful, served in painted vessels during feasts and rituals alike. Feasting was a vital aspect of elite social life. These gatherings, held in gardens, courtyards, or banquet halls, allowed hosts to demonstrate hospitality, status, and refinement. Guests reclined on cushioned benches or mats, entertained by musicians, dancers, and singers, while servants brought a steady flow of food and drink. Meals began with hand-washing, and perfumed oils were offered to guests as signs of respect. Platters were passed from person to person, and eating was done with fingers, using pieces of bread to scoop food. The order of service reflected the hierarchy among guests, with the most honored receiving the choicest portions and finest wine. Table manners, while not formalized in the modern sense, were still observed with attention. Loud or greedy behavior was frowned upon, and a host's generosity was measured not just by the quantity of food, but by its quality and presentation. Carved wooden trays, painted pottery, and metal utensils served as both tools and decorations, underscoring the richness of the occasion. Conversation, laughter, and storytelling accompanied the food, and feasts could stretch long into the night, especially during religious festivals or political celebrations. The elite's approach to food extended beyond the earthly. Offerings of meals were made regularly at family shrines and tombs, where painted images showed deceased relatives receiving bread, meat, wine, and fruit in the afterlife. Funerary texts and wall inscriptions described eternal banquets, suggesting that the pleasures of elite dining were not confined to life on earth, but expected to continue in the next world. This belief elevated the act of feasting to one of spiritual as well as social significance. In the private rhythm of daily life and the public grandeur of social events, food revealed much about ancient Egypt's upper class. It was a reflection of access, labor, culture, and belief, transformed daily by those who had the privilege to indulge in variety, flavor, and abundance. Through meals both modest and lavish, the elite reinforced their place at the top of the social order and affirmed their mastery over both nature and tradition. Among the many privileges enjoyed by the elite of ancient Egypt, education stood as one of the most defining. It was not merely a practical tool for managing estates or maintaining social order, but a mark of distinction that separated the cultured from the common. Nice in a civilization where literacy was rare, the ability to read and write was a gateway to power and prestige. For the children of nobles, priests, and high officials, education was an essential part of their upbringing and investment. In their future roles as leaders, advisors, and guardians of tradition, from an early age, these children were introduced to a structured and demanding system that aimed to instill discipline, intellectual sharpness, and cultural fluency. Education among the elite was formalized, and often took place in schools attached to temples or government institutions. These schools, sometimes referred to as houses of instruction or houses of life, were exclusive environments where young boys-girls were rarely educated, formerly were trained by experienced scribes and instructors. The sons of powerful families were expected to become scribes themselves, or take on roles in administration, the priesthood, or diplomacy. The path to these positions required not only social status but mastery of the tools and languages of authority. The core of their education centered on the complex Egyptian writing systems, especially hieratic and hieroglyphic scripts. Learning to write demanded long hours of copying signs, memorizing symbols, and developing precise control with reed pens and ink. Students began by reproducing standard texts and model letters before progressing to original composition. This process was both intellectual and physical, as scribal skill required dexterity, patience, and endurance. In addition to literacy, arithmetic and accounting were essential subjects. Boys were trained to handle quantities, record inventories, calculate land divisions, and manage taxes. These skills were critical for managing the economic affairs of the temples, estates, or government departments they were expected to serve. Mathematics lessons included multiplication, division, geometry, and understanding fractions, all applied in practical contexts. Record-keeping, measurement, and logistical planning were not abstract theories, but daily tasks of the educated class. Alongside these technical disciplines, moral and behavioral instruction formed an important component of elite education. Texts, such as the instructions of Ptahhotep or the teaching of Ani, offered guidance on wisdom, humility, obedience, and respect for authority. These wisdom texts were copied and studied not only for their literary value, but as ethical manuals that shaped the worldview of the elite. They promoted ideals of self-control, moderation, and loyalty, virtues essential for those entrusted with positions of influence. Education also had a performative and artistic aspect. Students were exposed to religious hymns, poetry, historical records, and proverbs. Mastery of spoken and written language enabled the elite to participate in ceremonies, compose prayers, draft legal documents, and communicate with foreign powers. Eloquence and clarity were signs of intelligence and breeding, and those who excelled in verbal expression often rose quickly in court or temple hierarchies. Although the majority of elite education was male-centered, there were exceptions. In certain priestly families or royal households, women of high rank were taught to read and write, especially if they were expected to manage property or correspond with religious institutions. Such cases, however, remained rare, and most women of the upper class were educated informally through family instruction rather than formal schooling. The structure of the educational day reflected a serious and disciplined environment. Students sat on the floor with writing boards in hand, copying from dictated passages or inscriptions. Mistakes were met with corrections or punishment, for precision was crucial. The instructors, often older scribes or priests, held authority, both as teachers and moral guides. The progress of a student was measured not by age, but by mastery. Some remained in training for many years before receiving appointments. Graduation into adult roles came gradually, as students took on small administrative tasks, assisted senior officials, or began work within temple archives or government offices. Education, for the elite, was not limited to childhood. Lifelong learning was common, especially as knowledge of laws, rituals, and evolving political structures required continual engagement. Many officials kept personal libraries, studied ancient texts, and even composed their own writings. Inscriptions, found in tombs, often proudly recounted educational achievements alongside public deeds, signaling the lasting prestige of intellectual accomplishment. Through education, the Egyptian elite preserved not only their personal power, but the cultural memory of their civilization. They became custodians of language, ritual, history, and law, and their learning was seen as a reflection of divine favor. In mastering the tools of knowledge, they reinforced their right to govern and to interpret the sacred and administrative systems that bound their society together. Power in ancient Egypt was not confined to the figure of the pharaoh. While he stood as the divine head of the state, the actual administration of the kingdom depended on a vast network of officials drawn from the elite. These individuals, selected for their loyalty, lineage, or proven skill, held positions that allowed them to shape the machinery of governance. The daily operation of temples, provinces, economic systems, and military campaigns all relied on the hands and minds of high-ranking nobles and civil servants. Through these roles, the elite exercised authority, negotiated regional tensions, and ensured that the will of the pharaoh was carried out across the land. Among the most powerful officials in the realm was the vizier, who functioned as the pharaoh's chief administrator, appointed from the ranks of the elite. The vizier served as the intermediary between the king and the rest of the bureaucracy. His responsibilities were vast and included overseeing taxation, judicial matters, public works, and temple management. All other officials reported to him, and his ability to maintain order in the realm was crucial to the stability of the state. He met with the pharaoh regularly, offering reports, delivering decrees, and executing policies. The office of vizier was one of high honor and extreme scrutiny. Any misstep could bring disgrace or worse. Beneath the vizier was a complex hierarchy of officials who governed the various districts and sectors of Egyptian society. These included provincial governors, known as nomarchs, who administered the nomes territorial divisions of the kingdom. A nomarch was responsible for collecting taxes, organizing local labor, maintaining irrigation systems, and ensuring the loyalty of the population. Their power often extended over large areas and included control over local temples and granaries. While they answered to the vizier and the pharaoh, in practice, many became semi-autonomous, especially during periods of political weakness. Their influence was rooted in their ability to manage resources and command regional loyalty. Other elite figures occupied roles in the judicial system. Judges, often drawn from noble families, presided over courts that handled both civil and criminal cases that were expected to embody the principles of Math, the ancient Egyptian concept of truth, justice, and order. Their rulings impacted not only individuals but also communities, as legal decisions often affected land rights, inheritance, and social disputes. Judges maintained detailed records and worked closely with scribes to ensure legal continuity. Their decisions were seen not simply as legal acts, but as affirmations of divine balance. The military also offered paths to power for members of the elite. Generals and military commanders, often appointed directly by the pharaoh, led campaigns into Nubia, Libya, and the Levant, expanding Egypt's territory and securing trade routes. Military success brought prestige and rewards, including land grants, titles, and political influence. Some of these commanders transitioned into administrative roles after their service, using their experience and reputation to govern strategically important regions. Their authority was not limited to the battlefield. It extended into diplomatic and economic spheres, as they often negotiated with foreign powers and managed military settlements. Temple administration provided another avenue for elite power. High-ranking priests not only performed sacred rituals, but also oversaw vast economic enterprises. Temples owned land, operated granaries, and employed large numbers of workers. Managing these resources required accounting, planning, and logistical coordination. Elite priests often sat on temple councils, coordinated festivals, and communicated with royal officials. Their influence was reinforced by their religious authority, which gave them a role in interpreting divine will and guiding public morality. In all these roles, the elite functioned as the engine of Egyptian governance. Their work was documented through official decrees, boundary stelae, and administrative correspondence, much of which survives today in tombs, temples, and papyri. They lived close to power and bore its burdens, responsible not only for wealth and privilege, but for ensuring the empire's endurance. The trust placed in them by the pharaoh came with expectations of competence, loyalty, and restraint. Those who fulfilled these expectations were rewarded with greater honors, while those who failed could lose everything. Their authority was visible not only in their titles, but in their interactions with the populace. They issued commands, settled disputes, organized labor forces for major construction projects, and determined the flow of goods and resources. Whether governing from a provincial palace, presiding over a court, or leading soldiers across foreign lands, the elite played a central role in shaping the political life of ancient Egypt. They formed a bridge between the divine authority of the king and the practical needs of the people, transforming royal will into daily reality and maintaining the structure of a civilization that prized order above all. Religion in ancient Egypt was not merely a matter of belief, it was the foundation upon which society, politics, and identity were built. For the elite, especially those who served as priests and priestesses, religion offered not only a spiritual role but a powerful institutional presence that shaped their influence within the kingdom. To occupy a high position in the priesthood was to wield authority that extended far beyond the temple walls. It was to serve the gods, interpret their will, and control vast economic, cultural, and political resources that intertwined the sacred with the administrative. The temples of ancient Egypt functioned as the physical homes of the gods, and those appointed to care for these divine beings were drawn almost exclusively from the elite. Priests were selected not merely for their piety, but for their social pedigree, education, and political loyalty. Once installed, they underwent purification rituals, adhered to strict codes of conduct, and participated in ceremonies that aimed to maintain cosmic balance. However, their duties were not limited to ritual performance. High priests were stewards of temple wealth, overseers of land, employers of workers, and curators of sacred knowledge. They managed granaries, organized festivals, administered justice within temple precincts, and maintained archives of religious and historical texts. The role of the priesthood varied depending on the god they served and the status of the temple. In major centers such as Thebes, Heliopolis, and Memphis, the temples were enormous complexes with thousands of workers and extensive agricultural holdings. The priests in these cities were immensely powerful, sometimes rivaling the authority of the state itself. The high priest of Amen at Thebes, for instance, was at times regarded as second only to the pharaoh, and his influence extended into military, diplomatic, and economic spheres. He coordinated with regional governors, presided over vast festivals, and determined how the temple's considerable resources were deployed. Priestly hierarchy was rigid and well-defined. At the top were the high priests, followed by ranks of prophets, ritual specialists, and musicians. Each position came with specific duties and privileges. Those of higher rank performed the most sacred rituals, including the daily awakening, feeding, and clothing of the deity's statue, a symbolic act that reaffirmed the god's presence in the material world. Lower-ranking priests performed support roles, maintained the temple grounds, or prepared offerings. Many priests served in rotational shifts, maintaining secular lives during their time off, which further reinforced the connection between temple service and elite domestic life. Religious festivals offered opportunities for public visibility and participation. During these events, elite priests led processions through the streets, displayed sacred artifacts, and engaged in public rituals meant to renew the relationship between gods and people. These ceremonies reinforced social order by dramatizing divine favor and celebrating the role of the elite in maintaining harmony. During the Opet festival, for example, the statue of Ammon was paraded from Karnak to Luxor, with high priests and nobles in formal attire guiding the event amid music, dance, and offerings. Such festivals were not only religious in character, but also functioned as political theater, reaffirming the authority of the ruling class. Women of high birth could also participate in temple life, most notably as chantresses, musicians, or, in rare cases, as gods' wives or high priestesses. These roles granted them considerable influence, particularly in temples devoted to female deities or in the service of royal cults. The title of God's wife of Ammon held exceptional power during certain periods, with its holder controlling significant temple wealth and commanding respect equal to male priests. Although their access to formal priestly duties was more limited than that of men, elite women's presence in the religious sphere symbolized the inclusive yet hierarchical nature of divine service. Temples were not isolated spiritual sanctuaries. They were centers of learning, where religious texts, medical treatises, astronomical records, and ritual manuals were preserved and studied. Priests were custodians of this intellectual tradition, responsible for its transmission and application. Their knowledge allowed them to calculate celestial movements for festival planning, interpret omens, and perform complex rites believed to influence events on Earth. The elite, through their access to this sacred knowledge, maintained control over the metaphysical dimensions of existence, a power that common people both revered and feared. The influence of the priesthood extended into matters of life and death. They performed funerary rites, ensured proper burial rituals, and maintained mortuary temples that served as sites of continued communication between the living and the dead. Through these practices, they shaped not only how people worshipped, but how they understood their place in the world and the afterlife. In doing so, the elite priests stood as mediators between the human and divine realms, reinforcing their indispensable role in the ongoing maintenance of order. To serve in the priesthood was to participate in one of the most enduring and powerful institutions in Egyptian history. It was a life of discipline, privilege, and sacred duty. Through their rituals, their knowledge, and their control of temple wealth, the religious elite did not simply interpret the will of the gods, they helped define it, ensuring that their presence remains central to the spiritual and political heartbeat of the nation. Beguntar, hatshepsut. Life for the elite in ancient Egypt extended far beyond duty and ceremony. While governance, ritual, and display occupied much of their attention, leisure played a central role in shaping their identity and daily rhythms. The privileged classes embraced moments of entertainment and recreation not merely as diversions, but as essential expressions of refinement, balance, and enjoyment of their elevated status. Leisure was structured and intentional, often conducted within the confines of their estates or in specially designated spaces, and it reflected both personal tastes and cultural ideals. For the elite, amusement was not indulgence, it was part of a complete and orderly life. One of the most common pastimes among the upper classes was board gaming, particularly the game known as Senet, which held both recreational and symbolic importance. Played on a grid of 30 squares, the game required strategy, luck, and concentration. Elaborate Senet boards, often made of inlaid wood or ivory, were kept in private chambers and used during moments of quiet relaxation or social gatherings. The movements of the pieces were believed to mimic the soul's journey through the afterlife. But in daily use, the game offered the elite a way to engage their minds, compete amicably, and demonstrate their sophistication. Other games and puzzles, some involving dice or knucklebones, also provided entertainment during informal settings. Music filled the homes and gardens of the wealthy, performed by trained musicians who were either household members or hired entertainers. Harps, flutes, lyres, and lutes were played to accompany meals, banquets, or moments of private contemplation. Music served not only as a background to elite life, but as an emotional and cultural force, enhancing the atmosphere of feasts, religious observances, and intimate gatherings. Singers and dancers were often part of private entertainment, especially during celebrations or when hosting honored guests. These performers, selected for their skill and beauty, added elegance to social events and reinforced the host's reputation for taste and hospitality. Hunting and fishing were also favored pursuits among the upper classes, offering both physical activity and symbolic prestige. These outings typically took place in specially maintained areas or along the Nile's marshes, and they were conducted with ritual overtones. The act of controlling and dominating nature reflected elite power and harmony with the natural world. Wealthy hunters used bows, spears, and boomerangs to take down birds, gazelles, and even larger animals, often accompanied by trained dogs and retinues of attendants. Fishing, usually conducted with nets or harpoons, was less dangerous but equally rewarding. These excursions were moments of freedom from the routines of administration, conducted under the open sky. With the scent of papyrus and water lilies in the air, boating was another favored activity, particularly among those who lived near the Nile or owned garden pools. Elegant boats carved from wood or constructed from papyrus were used for leisurely sails, sometimes propelled by servants or family members. Excursions on the river offered moments of peace, away from the formalities of court or temple. The flowing water, the sight of birds in flight, and the gentle movement of the current contributed to a deeply relaxing experience that blended natural beauty with elite control over space and time. Reading and storytelling formed quieter, more introspective forms of leisure. Members of the elite who were literator, who employed scribes, spent time with religious hymns, instructional texts, poetry, and narrative tales. Stories of gods, kings, and mythic journeys were passed down orally and through written manuscripts, enriching conversations and inspiring philosophical thought. Reading was not merely for information but for reflection, and it became a respected habit among those who wished to be seen as wise and cultivated. Gardens provided not only beauty and spiritual symbolism, but also venues for relaxation and intimate gatherings. Walks among shaded paths, conversations under trees, and meals beside pools transformed these green spaces into sanctuaries of pleasure. Flowers, birds, and scents created an environment that appealed to all the senses, offering a contrast to the arid surroundings of Egypt's broader landscape. Garden leisure was calm, unhurried, and deeply private, an opportunity for families and guests to enjoy moments of simplicity amid the grandeur of elite life. Feasting, while often a public display, also had a more personal role in leisure. The elite enjoyed sharing meals with close companions, accompanied by conversation, music, and drink. These informal gatherings allowed for moments of laughter, reflection, and bonding, removed from the structured protocols of state and temple. Servants attended discreetly, keeping the atmosphere comfortable and uninterrupted, while hosts took pride in creating memorable experiences for their guests. For children of the elite, play was also part of their upbringing. Toy animals, dolls, miniature chariots, and games of mimicry filled their early years, preparing them not only for adult responsibilities but also for the social graces expected of their class. Tutors and attendants supervised their play, ensuring that even moments of joy were aligned with discipline and learning. Leisure for the Egyptian elite was not isolated from the larger rhythms of their culture, was woven into the fabric of their daily lives. It reflected their access to space, time, and human resources. It offered both escape and reinforcement of identity. Whether through games, music, nature, or contemplation, the leisure activities of the elite served as quiet affirmations of a life lived above necessity, structured around ideals of harmony, refinement, and fulfillment. Marriage and family life among the elite of ancient Egypt were fundamental aspects of their identity and social continuity, woven deeply into the fabric of both personal and political life. Unlike the experiences of the common people, where marriages often had a practical and communal character, elite marriages carried layers of strategic, economic, and symbolic importance. These unions were not solely private matters of affection, but were pivotal in securing alliances, consolidating wealth, and maintaining the purity and prestige of noble bloodlines. From childhood, individuals of high status were prepared for roles that transcended personal fulfillment, serving instead as critical links in the web of elite relationships that sustained power and privilege across generations. Within the elite class, marriages were commonly arranged by families with the intention of strengthening political ties or economic interests. Parents sought matches that would enhance their social standing or secure the loyalty of influential factions. The negotiation of these marriages involved discussions of dowries, land, titles, and mutual obligations, turning the union into a complex contract that extended far beyond the personal sphere. These arrangements were often carefully recorded and witnessed by scribes to ensure clarity and legitimacy, while love and companionship might develop within these marriages. The overriding emphasis was on alliance and continuity. The household, under the guidance of the husband and wife, was a center of both family life and estate management. Men generally held legal authority over property and public affairs, but elite women wielded significant influence within the domestic sphere and often managed vast estates in their own right. Women could own property independently, inherit from their parents, and make legal contracts. In some cases, they acted as overseers of agricultural production, directed household servants, and controlled the education of children. The role of the wife was multifaceted. She was a mother, a manager, a religious participant, and a symbol of the family's honor. Marital fidelity was highly valued, especially for women, as it ensured legitimate succession and reinforced social order. The raising of children was a central concern for elite families, as offspring represented not only personal joy, but the continuation of lineage and legacy. Children were cherished, and great care was taken in their upbringing, education, and socialization. From an early age, boys were prepared for future roles as scribes, officials, or priests, while girls learned domestic skills and religious practices appropriate to their status. The nurturing environment combined affection with strict discipline, reflecting the cultural ideal of mat order and balance. Stories, songs, and teachings reinforced social values, and children were introduced to their family's history and responsibilities from a young age. Marriage ceremonies among the elite were occasions of significant celebration, often held within the family estate and marked by feasting, music, and ritual. While the exact details of these ceremonies remain somewhat obscure, they likely included the exchange of gifts, symbolic acts to invoke divine blessing, and public declarations of the union. These events served to affirm not only the bond between two individuals but also the cohesion of extended family networks and the broader elite community. Religious rituals might be incorporated to ensure fertility and prosperity, invoking gods such as Hathor or Isis, who were patrons of marriage and motherhood. Polygamy was not widespread among the elite, but did occur, especially among pharaohs and high officials who sought to secure heirs or forge additional alliances. In such cases, the status of wives varied, with a principal wife holding precedence and others occupying secondary roles. These arrangements could complicate family dynamics, but also extended the reach of elite families through offspring and connections. Despite this, monogamous marriage was the norm for most nobles, and the stability of the household was highly prized. Death and mourning rituals were integral to family life, especially in the elite context where ancestor worship and the hope for an afterlife played critical roles. Families prepared elaborate tombs and funerary goods to ensure that the deceased would be honored and cared for beyond death. These practices underscored the importance of familial bonds and continuity, as descendants maintained the memory and status of their ancestors through ritual offerings and commemorations. The family was thus a living institution that spanned generations, linking past, present, and future in a continuum of social and spiritual significance. Throughout all aspects of marriage and family life, the elite maintained a delicate balance between public expectation and private experience. Their unions were simultaneously personal and political, tender and strategic, rooted in love, yet governed by duty. In navigating these complexities, the elite ensured the survival of their status and the perpetuation of their values. Through marriage, childbirth, education, and ceremony, they crafted a legacy that echoed through the halls of history, reflecting both the human heart and the enduring structures of ancient Egyptian society. Clothing and textile production held a unique significance in the lives of the ancient Egyptian elite, representing not only practical needs but also a symbol of status, identity, and cultural sophistication. While garments were essential for protection against the sun and heat for the wealthy, the making and wearing of clothing were deeply intertwined with notions of purity, elegance, and social distinction. The elite's clothing was a visible expression of their refined taste and their access to the best materials and skilled artisans. From the cultivation of flax to the final tailoring and decoration of garments, the processes surrounding textiles reflected a complex blend of craft, economy, and symbolism that permeated elite society. The journey of fine linen, the fabric most prized by the elite, began in the fields where flax was grown. This crop required careful tending and harvesting, often carried out by laborers under the direction of estate managers. After harvesting, the flax stalks underwent a lengthy process of retting, drying, and beating to separate the valuable fibers. These fibers were then spun into threads with remarkable skill, producing yarn that was both strong and fine. The quality of linen depended on the fineness of the fibers and the skill of the spinner, with the best yarns used to create the garments of nobles and priests. Flax cultivation and textile production were important economic activities within elite estates, contributing to wealth as well as clothing. Weaving was a highly specialized craft, often performed by women who worked at looms to transform spun yarn into fabric. The looms of ancient Egypt were vertical and simple in design, yet they allowed for the creation of exceptionally fine textiles. Weavers could produce linen of varying thickness and density, with the finest fabrics almost transparent, prized for their coolness and elegance in the Egyptian climate. The elite favored clothing made from this sheer high-quality linen, which was both a status marker and a comfort. Linen production was often supervised by overseers, especially on large estates or within temple complexes, ensuring the quality and quantity necessary for ceremonial, everyday, and funerary uses. Dyeing and embellishment, while less common in early periods, became increasingly significant for the elite over time. Though white linen symbolized purity and was the most common color for clothing, some garments were dyed with natural pigments such as indigo, madder, or saffron to produce blues, reds, and yellows. Decorative techniques included embroidery, applique, and pleating. Pleated garments, in particular, were a hallmark of elite fashion, requiring considerable skill and effort. The precision and elegance of pleating communicated wealth and refinement, as it was labor-intensive and required expensive fabrics that could hold the shape. Accessories such as belts, collars, and sashes added further complexity and personalization to outfits. Tailoring was another layer of refinement. While many garments were simple in design, wrapped or draped around the body, elite clothing often involved careful cutting and sewing to create fitted shapes that enhanced the wearer's appearance. Skilled tailors employed fine threads and needles to produce garments that balanced comfort with style. Royalty and nobility often had personal tailors who ensured that each piece met the highest standards. Clothing was custom-made for individuals, taking into account their status, gender, and occasion. Whether for daily wear, ceremonies, or funerals, textiles were more than just garments. They were woven with symbolic meanings. White linen, for example, was associated with ritual purity and was worn by priests during ceremonies. The fabric's cleanliness was vital, as it symbolized the wearer's moral and spiritual state. Clothing also acted as a visual marker of rank. Certain colors, patterns, or accessories were reserved for specific offices or social classes, making attire a code understood by all. In tomb paintings and statues, the garments of elites are carefully depicted, emphasizing their social position and idealized appearance. The production and use of textiles also played a role in the economy and gift exchange among the elite. Fine linen was a valuable commodity, given as tribute to the pharaoh or exchanged as diplomatic gifts with foreign dignitaries. Workshops specializing in weaving and embroidery operated under the patronage of nobles and temples, producing textiles for both local use and export. The wealth generated by textile production contributed to the economic power of elite families and religious institutions alike. Funerary clothing was another important aspect of textile use for the elite. Tomb paintings and preserved burial goods revealed that the dead were often dressed in their finest linen, sometimes adorned with jewelry or ceremonial sashes. Linen wrappings, carefully prepared for mummification, also reflected the skill and resources devoted to ensuring the deceased's passage to the afterlife. The care and quality of these textiles were believed to impact the soul's success beyond death, making them integral to both earthly life and eternal destiny. In all aspects, from the field to the loom, from dye pot to wardrobe, the production and wearing of textiles symbolized the elite's control over nature, labor, and culture. Their garments were crafted with care, representing more than mere clothing. They were a woven narrative of identity, power, and sacred order. Through fine linen and exquisite tailoring, the elite of ancient Egypt clothed themselves in dignity, distinction, and the timeless ideals of their civilization. The elite of ancient Egypt cultivated an appreciation for art that transcended mere decoration and function. For them, art was a vital expression of cultural values, personal identity, and spiritual connection. Artistic production was deeply embedded in their daily lives, surroundings, and public displays, reflecting their status and their role as patrons and consumers of creativity. Unlike common artisans who might produce utilitarian objects, elite commissions were often imbued with symbolic meaning, crafted with meticulous skill, and designed to endure for eternity. The appreciation of art among the upper classes was inseparable from their worldview, one in which beauty, order, and representation served as extensions of divine and social order. Artisans working for the elite created works across a wide range of media: stone, wood, metal, faience, and painted surfaces. Sculpture was especially prized, from small statues designed to house the Katha vital spirit of the individual to monumental reliefs adorning temple walls and tombs. The elite commissioned these works not only as displays of wealth, but as vehicles for preserving their legacy and ensuring their favor with the gods. Portraits carved in stone or cast in bronze captured idealized likenesses, emphasizing youthful vigor, strength, and divine favor. These representations adhered to strict artistic conventions, which reinforced social hierarchies and cosmic harmony. Symmetry, proportion, and formal poses conveyed timelessness, and deviation from these rules was rare among elite art, as it risked upsetting the delicate balance of Ma. Single quotes: a dot painting was another prominent form of elite art, often found in tombs, palaces, and temples. These works illustrated scenes of daily life, religious rituals, mythological narratives, and the achievements of the individual. Painted walls served as windows into an idealized world, where the deceased was shown enjoying the pleasures of the afterlife or the power wielded in life. Color symbolism was significant, with hues carefully chosen for their meanings: green for fertility and rebirth, red for vitality and chaos, blue for the divine sky. The use of pigments made from minerals such as malachite, azurite, and ochre required skilled preparation and application. Elite patrons demanded the highest quality materials and artists capable of executing detailed, vibrant compositions. Jewelry and decorative objects also constituted a vital part of elite artistic culture. Craftsmen specialized in working precious metals and stones to produce amulets, collars, bracelets, and ceremonial items. These objects were both beautiful and charged with symbolic power, intended to protect the wearer or convey their status and divine favor. The intricate craftsmanship involved techniques such as filigree, granulation, and inlay, reflecting a mastery of materials and aesthetic sensibility. Elite individuals often collected and displayed these works as markers of wealth and refinement. Literature and written art forms were valued components of elite culture, contributing to their artistic identity. Calligraphy and the production of illuminated manuscripts, or carefully inscribed stele, demonstrated the intertwining of artistic skill with literacy. The form and style of hieroglyphic inscriptions carried aesthetic as well as communicative weight, designed to honor gods, commemorate deeds, and proclaim status. Elite scribes, trained in the arts of writing, contributed to this visual culture, often collaborating with painters and sculptors. Art was also integral to ritual and ceremony, where visual elements enhanced the experience and reinforced meaning. Ceremonial objects such as ornate scepters, intricately carved staffs, and finely crafted altars were part of the elite's religious and social performances. The design and iconography of these items were carefully chosen to align with theological concepts and social ideals, linking the individual with cosmic order. During festivals and state occasions, art helped articulate the power and legitimacy of rulers and priests, communicating messages to both participants and observers. The elite's patronage extended beyond private commissions to public works that shaped the cultural landscape. They financed temples, tombs, and monumental architecture adorned with art designed to last millennia. These projects employed vast numbers of skilled artisans, and their completion was seen as a reflection of the patron's piety, power, and legacy. The commissioning of such works was often recorded in inscriptions that detailed the donors' titles, achievements, and devotion, linking their identity forever to the sacred and artistic heritage of Egypt. In essence, art among the elite was not a passive enjoyment but an active engagement with the principles that governed Egyptian civilization. It was a means of asserting identity, communicating with the divine, and participating in a cultural continuum that transcended generations. Through their patronage, creation, and display of art, the elite shaped the visual and symbolic language of their world, leaving a legacy of beauty and meaning that endures as a testament to their values and aspirations. The passage from life to death was a journey of profound significance for the elite of ancient Egypt, imbued with layers of ritual, belief, and preparation that reflected their unique relationship with the divine and the afterlife. Unlike the common populace, whose funerary practices were often modest, the elite engaged in elaborate ceremonies designed to secure eternal existence and maintain their status beyond mortal bounds. Death was not seen as an end, but as a transformation, ongoing process that required meticulous attention to detail, the support of family and priests, and the preservation of the body and soul. This intricate process revealed much about the values, hopes, and worldview of Egypt's upper classes. From the moment of death, a complex series of rituals began, centered on safeguarding the deceased's journey through the underworld. The body was embalmed through mummification, a process refined over centuries to prevent decay and maintain physical integrity. Elite families employed skilled embalmers who removed internal organs, treated the body with natron and resins, and wrapped it carefully in linen bandages. This preservation was crucial, as the intact body was believed to house the Kota vital spirit that would need to recognize and return to it. The mummification process was expensive and time-consuming, reserved primarily for those with the resources to afford the best care. The quality of embalming and the richness of funerary goods reflected social status, signaling the deceased's rank and ensuring their comfort in the next world. The tomb itself was a central element of elite funerary practice, constructed to last for eternity. Tombs varied from elaborately decorated rock-cut chambers to grand mastabas and pyramids. The architecture of these tombs was designed not only to protect the body, but to provide a home for the deceased's spirit and to facilitate ongoing rituals. Walls were covered with painted scenes depicting the deceased's life, offerings, and the journey through the afterlife. These images served a dual purpose: to honor the dead and to provide magical assistance during their passage. The inscriptions included prayers, spells from the Book of the Dead, and hymns meant to guide and protect. Tombs often contained statues, furniture, and vessels filled with food and drink offerings, ensuring the deceased's needs were met perpetually. Funerary goods were carefully selected and arranged to sustain the deceased and reflect their earthly status. Items included jewelry, weapons, clothing, furniture, and even model servants and animals. These objects served as substitutes, magically animated to serve their owner in the afterlife. Elite tombs often contained Shabti figures, small statues, that would perform labor on behalf of the deceased, highlighting the desire to maintain comfort and leisure beyond death. The quality and quantity of these goods reinforced social distinctions, as wealthier individuals could commission more elaborate assemblages that promised a more privileged existence. Rituals conducted by priests and family members were essential to ensuring the deceased's safe passage and acceptance among the gods. The opening of the mouth ceremony, for example, was performed to restore the senses to the mummy, enabling the spirit to breathe, eat, and speak in the afterlife. This ritual involved symbolic gestures with specialized tools and prayers invoking divine powers. Funerary priests wore specific garments and followed prescribed protocols to maintain ritual purity. These ceremonies were public and private, involving mourners who expressed grief and offerings that nourished both the living and the dead. The belief in an afterlife, where the deceased would live eternally in a world mirroring their earthly existence, underpinned these practices. The elite envisioned an eternal paradise, the field of reeds, where they could enjoy agricultural abundance, family, and leisure. However, entry to this blessed realm required passing judgment before Osiris, the god of the dead, who weighed the heart against the feather of Mat. Only those deemed righteous and pure would gain eternal life. This judgment reinforced the ethical framework of elite society, linking moral conduct in life with rewards after death. It underscored the importance of maintaining order, truth, and balance, principles that governed both the living world and the afterlife. Family played a crucial role in sustaining the memory and well-being of the deceased. Descendants were responsible for performing ongoing rituals, presenting offerings, and maintaining the tomb. This act of remembrance was seen as a reciprocal relationship, ensuring the deceased's protection and favor in return for blessings. Upon the living, tomb inscriptions frequently emphasized the importance of this duty, reflecting a social contract that extended across generations. Elite families invested heavily in maintaining these connections, commissioning priests and allocating resources to secure their ancestors' eternal comfort. Through their funerary customs, the elite of ancient Egypt expressed a profound confidence in the continuity of existence beyond death. Their elaborate tombs, rituals, and beliefs created a bridge between worlds, a means to transcend mortality and achieve divine favor. In doing so, they preserved their identity, power, and values across the boundaries of time. Death, in this culture, was not a final severance, but a passage into an everlasting life, carefully prepared and guarded by generations of devotion. The legacy of these practices remains a testament to the ancient Egyptians' vision of eternity and the enduring significance of the elite's place within it.